Okay, we will start the session. First and foremost, please pass me a message whether you guys can hear me properly. Send me a message whether you guys can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay, thank you so much. So, welcome to the class. We will start our second poem today, which is To the Evening Star. Right, I hope that you guys can see the screen as well. Right, so we are going to discuss about our second poem today, To the Evening Star by William Blake. So basically, last week we discussed about our first poem, which is Eagle by Alfred Lord Tennyson. We discussed a couple of target questions as well and how to write answers for that kind of questions when it comes to the poem. So these are the key areas we discussed. And today we are going to start a new poem. So here you have to pay your attention very carefully because in your syllabus, grade 10 syllabus, this can be taken as one of the most difficult poems that you come across. So you are new to the subject. So sometimes you may feel a little bit difficult to understand this poem. So if you come across certain problems without having any doubts, make sure to send me a message and make sure to ask on the spot and make sure to clear your gray areas, whatever the doubts that you have. Before going to this poem, I would like to mention you, even the last week I gave you a simple introduction about this romantic poetry. We are going to start romantic poetry and romantic era. If I am not mistaken, last week I gave you a note about romantic poetry and I asked you to be familiar with this particular era and the history related to that romantic category. So if I explain you again, when we take English literature as a subject, this subject is actually originated in England or else in United Kingdom. So when you take literature genres, literature eras, we have divided the time periods according to the rulers who ruled England during that particular time period. Now, if you take Sinhala literature, we have divided Sinhala literature like Kotte Yugaya, Damadeni Yugaya, Yapahuva, Polonnaru Yugaya, something like that, we have divided, right? So Kotte is known to be the most flourishing time period when it comes to Sinhala literature, right? Especially the Salalihini Sandeshaya was written during the Kotte period. Just like that, when you refer to English literature, we have divided the time periods according to the names of the rulers. At that particular time period, who is the particular ruler governed the country. If that period belongs to Queen Victoria, we call that Victorian period. If that particular time period is referred to Queen Elizabeth, we call that Elizabethan period. If that particular period is controlled by King Edward, we call that Edwardian period, something like that. So as literature students, you have to understand how we are actually dividing these eras, how the time periods are divided. So in our syllabus, first and foremost, we started with Victorian time period, Victorian era. Even Alfred Lord Tennyson, William Blake, both of them belong to Victorian period. Alfred Lord Tennyson is known to be the poet laureate. I told you, he is known to be the foremost and the most celebrated poet during that time period because the royal court nominated him as the poet laureate, the poet who represents the court, the poet who writes poem representing the royal palace. During the Victorian era, when we discuss about the Victorian era, we have to understand during this Victorian era, an important incident, historical incident also occurred which is known to be industrialization. Why this industrialization is important to us? Because with the emergence of industrialization, everything changed. The entire setting of United Kingdom was changed. This particular revolution actually affected for literature as well. That is why I am giving you an explanation about this industrialization. Now, before industrialization, people used to do their work manually, right? So if you want to make a car, if you want to make a cart, or if you want to make something, couple of people were employed and they worked really hard and they did that, and it took certain period of time. But with the industrialization, my dear students, what happened? Everything was automated. So manual labor was not needed. Manual labor was not needed. Instead of that, the country people used machines. So manual labor was replaced by machines. Can you understand now? In order to make a trouser, actually 4 people had to work for 2 days to 3 days in order to manufacture a trouser. Just imagine. But with industrialization, what actually happened? One machine can produce 5 trousers, right, within an hour. So with machines, human labor was neglected and ill-treated because machines were more powerful and efficient than human labor. Can you understand what I am explaining here? So as a result of that, most of the people, they lost their jobs. So the companies, they told them, we don't need you anymore because now we have machines. We don't need your manual labor. We can't provide you now. We can't give you a job. So most of the people, they lost their jobs. So unemployment became one of the major problems during Victorian era. Most of the people, they didn't have jobs. As a result of that, because of poverty, because of helplessness, they started doing different types of unlawful activities. They started to rob, they started to plunder, they started to kill people. So a lot of unlawful activities emerged during this time period because of the unemployment. Not only that, this actually affected for small children as well. So children, they never received proper education. Most of the street children, they engaged in different types of risky activities, risky jobs. I hope that you have heard about Oliver Twist, a very popular book which discusses about a child, what kind of troubles and tribunals that he faced. He didn't know about his mother and father. At the end of the day, he wins his life. So if you read if you pay your attention to books like Oliver Twist, you can realize about the Victorian England, how children are treated. So even children suffocated. They were not given proper education, no food, no nourishment, nothing at all. So child exploitation, they were employed in different types of jobs, right? Certain jobs they couldn't even do, but in order to gain some profit margin, most of the people, they asked children to engage in different jobs. So children were neglected and exploited. On the other hand, women. Now most of the women, they also lost their jobs. So women could not engage in killing and murdering and plundering. As a result of that, they started to selling their body. That is what we call prostitution. They started selling their body. So likewise, when it comes to this Victorian society, we can understand economically the country was developing. But morally, we can clearly find the decline. Economically, the country was developing. A moral decline can be seen when it comes to Victorian society. So this particular social phenomenon affected for literature as well. As a result of that, 2 categories can be found when it comes to Victorian era, where certain writers, they wrote about these social problems that I mentioned. What are the social problems that I mentioned? Child exploitation, unemployment, environment pollution, prostitution, overpopulation. These are the key problems that most of the writers saw, most of the writers observed during the Victorian era. So they started to write about this. The best example is Charles Dickens, right? I hope that you have heard about Oliver Twist. So when you refer to Charles Dickens wrote most of the novels related to children and what kind of problems that children faced. Oliver Twist can be taken as one of the best examples. Great Expectations, Tale of Two Cities, David Copperfield. If you refer to these novels, you can understand what kind of troubles and tribunals faced by children who lived in the Victorian period. Right? On the other hand, there are another set of writers, they never wanted to write about these realities. They knew about these realities, but they never wanted to highlight them. So they are not realitical writers, they are known to be romantic writers. Instead of highlighting the social problems, they highlighted about the beauty of nature. They highlighted about their individual problems. They highlighted about their subjectivity. So these writers are known to be romantic writers, or else a new genre called romanticism. So what is romanticism? Romanticism can be taken as a set of writers who emerged during the 19th century of England who actually rejected the social reality. They never wrote about social reality. They always wrote about fantasy. They wanted to escape from these problems into a new world. So they never wanted to write about the realitical problems. They wanted to escape from reality into fantasy. So they wrote about a lot of imaginative things. They wrote about beauty of nature. They wrote about beauty of the environment. They wrote about their personal problems, subjective experiences. So they wanted to escape from these issues. They are known to be romantic writers. So don't misunderstand. Romantic refers to the love for nature, right? The love of escaping from the reality. It doesn't mean that love between two teenagers, young girl and a boy. Don't misunderstand. That idea is not given here. Romanticism refers to romantic writers. They highlighted the beauty of nature. They never discussed about unemployment. They never discussed about child exploitation. They never discussed about prostitution. They discussed about the beauty of nature, visual imagery, imagination, escaping from the reality and individual ideas. So when you take William Blake can be taken as a romantic writer. He is known to be a very popular romantic writer who belongs to the first generation of romanticism. So you have to remember that history, and then you have to remember why William Blake is known to be a romantic writer. Because To the Evening Star is a poem which appreciates the beauty of the evening star. And as you know, the evening star can be taken as a creation of nature. One of the key features of romantic poets, they always highlighted the beauty of nature. So in our syllabus, we have two romantic poets. We have William Blake representing the first generation, To the Evening Star, and we have John Keats who represents the second generation with the poem To the Nile. So we are going to learn about two romantic poets, right? First one is William Blake, but I just wanted to give you an idea. What do you mean by this romanticism? Romanticism refers to the emergence of set of writers who actually disregarded or rejected the social realities of that particular time period. Irrespective of that, they wrote about the fantasies or else escapism and how to enjoy their lives without facing the reality. So William Blake can be taken as one of them. I hope you can understand that history, that background is very much important. So make sure to keep that in your mind. What do you mean by romanticism? How romanticism came into consideration because of the industrialization, right? So two categories of writers can be seen. Number one, the realitical writers who wrote about the reality. Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens can be taken as the realitical writers. On the other hand, we can find the romantic writers. Even the romantic writers can be divided into two parts, first generation and second generation. First generation refers to the writers who initiated this particular genre. They are the ones who started. There we have basically three prominent writers. William Wordsworth, who is known to be the father of Romanticism. Then we have Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and then we have William Blake. Right? These three poets are the famous poets who represented the first generation of Romantic poetry. On the other hand, we have second generation of Romantic poets. They are known to be John Keats, and we have Percy Bysshe Shelley, P.B. Shelley, right? A very popular Romantic poet. And we have different types of other Romantic poets under this category. The two most prominent figures are P.B. Shelley and John Keats. So first and foremost, we have to understand about Romanticism, because in this particular poem, we discuss about the Romanticism as well. So before going to the poem, I just want you to give you an introduction to the poet, right? So we all know who is the poet, and we all know he represents the first generation. He is a very popular poet when it comes to the field of English literature, especially when we discuss about Romantic literature or Romantic nature. You guys can start writing. I hope you guys can see the screen. Let's read. And while I am reading, you guys can complete your note. William Blake was a 19th century writer and artist who is regarded as a seminal figure of the Romantic age. I told you he belongs to the first generation of Romantic poetry. With him, we can find two prominent writers. Number one, William Wordsworth, right? You can write them down. William Wordsworth, he is known to be the father of Romanticism. And then we have Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He is also known to be one of the key figures under the category of Romantic era who represented first generation. And then we have William Blake. He is also known to be a very powerful, prominent key writer who represented the Romantic era in the first generation. His writings have influenced countless writers and artists through the ages. When you take the second generation, we can realize John Keats, P.B. Shelley, and other writers also influenced by him, right? Influenced by him by looking at his poetry, by looking at his writing style. They also decided that we should also write like this. So that is why they became very popular later under the second generation. So make sure to remember what is Romanticism, what are the reasons that Romanticism actually emerged as a new genre when it comes to English literature, and who are the seminal figures who highlighted this particular genre, which is known to be one of the prominent genres under the category of English literature. So if you are learning literature as a subject for O levels or A levels or university level, you cannot escape from William Blake, because we cannot discuss about English literature without discussing about Victorian era and Romantic age. Because this particular time period can be taken as the most flourishing era when it comes to English literature. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. So today we started our poem with an introduction to our writer. Hurry up. I need 5 students to send me a message. So you can use the chat section. After completing your note, you can send me a message saying that, sir, we have completed the note. Then we can move on to the next part. Still, we are giving an explanation to the writer. If you have finished, please pass me a message. Right, we have Vaishnavi, and we have Vishwa, and we have Nisandi. They have completed. What about the others? Please pass me a message. 3 students have completed. And I am happy some of you have sent me some answers and I have corrected them, which means that I have shown certain weaknesses, certain loopholes, certain issues that you have when it comes to writing. So I have mentioned them as well. Please make sure to go through, and I really appreciate your efforts, especially students like Monadi. Very good. You have understood the difficulty of the subject and you are ready to cope up with that. So most of you are new to the subject, and you may be thinking that this is one of the most, easy subjects to cover. But make sure to remember this is one of the most difficult subjects when it comes to O-level syllabus, right? So you have to participate to the class every single day. Otherwise, you will face trouble. So now I explained you about William Blake and why he is an important character. So now we will have a deep discussion about his writing style and what kind of themes that he highlighted when it comes to his writing style. Okay, so I hope that you guys can see the screen. Let's pay your attention. William Blake, 1757-1827, was a visionary poet, painter, and printmaker whose works combined profound spiritual, philosophical, and social themes. His poetry often blends mystical imagery. I told you during the Romantic period, most of the writers they wanted to write about mystical things, right? Mysterious things, because they never wanted to highlight about social problems which prevailed during that time period. They never wrote about social problems. But William Blake can be taken as a special writer, even though he represents Romantic era. He highlighted certain problems in his poems. If you take poems like London, if you take poems like The Chimney Sweepers, we can clearly understand being a romantic writer who represents first generation, he never fails to write about the social problems of contemporary England which prevailed during that time period. So William Blake can be taken as a radical writer. Why he is known to be a radical writer? What do you mean by radical? He is actually an unorthodox writer because most of the romantics they did not actually mention about these social problems. They never wanted to mention about these social problems. But William Blake, he wrote about the beauty of nature, he wrote about the beauty of the environment. At the same time, he wrote about the social problems as well. So he highlighted reality and fantasy both. That is why he is known to be a radical writer. I hope you can understand. So here I have mentioned blends mystical imagery with social and moral critique, making him a precursor to the Romantic movement, right? Who is known to be a precursor? Precursor means one of the most seminal figures, right? I told you, even though he is a Romantic poet, he never forgets to criticize the behavioral patterns of the higher authorities when it comes to people, right? So when it comes to the poems like Chimney Sweepers, he discusses about innocent children and what kind of attitude that the church has towards these children. On the other hand, if you take poems like London, where he highlights the social pressure and the mental pressure undergone by people who live in London due to industrialization. So, as literature students, you have to remember William Blake is known to be a very powerful poet under the category of Romanticism because of two reasons. Number one, he wrote very beautiful poems about the beauty of nature. At the same time, when most of the Romantic poets were silent about mentioning these social problems, William Blake actually highlighted certain remarkable poems which actually clearly expressed us the social problems faced by people who lived during the contemporary period. Making him a precursor to the Romantic movement, Blake's poetry can be categorized into different collections. Basically, when we discuss about William Blake, his poems can be divided into two parts, right? So these are very much important. Pay your attention, right? So when you take all the poems written by William Blake, they can be divided into two parts. What are the two parts? Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, right? You can highlight them. So when it comes to his writing, his poems can be divided into two parts. They are known to be Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, right? These two categories can be seen when it comes to his poems. So definitely we have to get some kind of an idea about these two categories, and we have to learn what do you mean by Songs of Innocence and what do you mean by Songs of Experience, right? So these two categories are very popular when it comes to his writing. So basically, his poems can be divided into two parts, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Can you please pass me a message? 2 students have completed. Once I started to change the slide, I humbly request from you to complete your writing, because I have told you, when it comes to your literature paper, you have to write really fast. You have 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, you have to complete the answer writing at least 2.5 pages with 4 quotations. So that would not be an easy task, right? If you write slowly, right, that would not be an easy task. So make sure to write fast. So that is some kind of a skill that you have to improve when you are doing literature as a subject. This is not English language. This is English literature, right? So your writing should be very fast. Otherwise, there is no point of knowing all the quotations and all the explanations if you can't write and show it with the given time period. If you can't manage your time, then there is a problem, right? Okay, now here I have mentioned that William Blake is known to be a very popular poet, and when we divide his poetry, basically we can find 2 categories. His poems can be learned under 2 categories. What are the 2 categories? Songs of innocence and songs of experience. Right. Okay, we will move on. First and foremost, we will try to understand what do you mean by songs of innocence, right? So he wrote these kind of poems during 1789. So when you take songs of innocence, this collection reflects themes of purity, joy, and the untainted perspective of childhood. However, even its optimism, there are undertones of societal critique, right? That is what I told you. So when you take the poetry of under the category of innocence, these poems are very simple in nature and they are very pure, right? Very much pure, and you can find the purity where you don't find any corrupted attitudes, because these poems are written in a child's perspective, right? So child can be taken as an innocent character. That is why these set of poems are known to be songs of innocence. All these poems are written under the category of under the perspective of a child. So they are known to be songs of innocence. Even though we said like that, there are certain poems actually written by him during this time period which discusses about the social injustice and social issues which actually occurred during the Victorian period. But nevertheless, songs of innocence, you have to remember, when you take William Blake, when you write about songs of innocence, what you have to remember, songs of innocence refers to certain poems that William Blake wrote from the perspective of a child, where you don't find any corruption, where you don't find any anger, where you don't find any aggression, right? Most of the poems actually written under the category of purity, joy, and untainted, right? So these poems are actually very much simple in nature and they are not tainted. They are very pure and they are full of joy because they are written in a child's perspective, right? That is why they are known to be songs of innocence. There are so many poems under this category. In this level, we are not going to learn about that. We just wanted to know what do you mean by songs of innocence and what do you mean by songs of experience. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right. Okay. So here you have to understand Songs of Innocence refers to when William Blake writing poetry, he actually wrote a couple of poems from a child's perspective. When you take a child, the child is not corrupted. He doesn't know what is jealousy. He doesn't know what do you mean by aggression. He doesn't know what do you mean by hubris. He doesn't understand any of these things. So certain poems are written by William Blake from that perspective. So in these poems, we don't find any jealousy. We don't find any hatred. We don't find any aggression. These poems are very simple, just like a set of poems written by a child. The idea itself is very innocent. That is what we call songs of innocence. So now you can understand if there are songs of innocence, if there are positivities, definitely there should be negativities as well. Both should be there, right? If there are positivities, definitely there should be negativities as well. Now let's find out the other category, which is known to be songs of experience, right? So this is actually totally different to the previous one. Here, William Blake highlights social problems, corruption, vengeance, aggression, right? So these things are actually highlighted when it comes to his poems, which is under the category of songs of experience, right? So let's pay our attention to the slide. The companion collection to Songs of Innocence. This explores themes of corruption, suffering, and the harsh realities of the world. It reflects Blake's belief that experience is a necessary stage of spiritual development. So he actually strongly believed the fact that, yes, when we were children, we don't have a lot of experience and we think that each and every person is very good. They are very kind to us. They are very innocent towards us. But once we get old, once we get experience only, we get to know about this world. So when you take this particular category, my dear students, he wrote most of the poems under this category, paying attention towards to the experience of the world. So in these poems, we can find certain social problems, certain weaknesses of human characteristics, such as corruption, suffering, vengeance, jealousy, hatred, anger. These characteristics can be found in poetry of songs of experience. It reflects Blake's belief that experience is a necessary stage of spiritual development. So when you take William Blake, basically when you take his poetry can be divided into two categories. What are they? They are referred to songs of experience and songs of innocence. Songs of innocence refers to, right, his poems which discusses about certain aspects of life from a very much innocent perspective, just like a child. When you take songs of experience, these poems can be identified as a set of poems actually written by him from an adult's perspective with a lot of experience. A person who has understood about the world, the environment which he lives in. So these are the two categories that we can find when it comes to William Blake. So when you are writing answers, especially essay type answers, as you know, you have to write an introduction. So when you are writing an introduction, these information will be very much fruitful for you in order to organize your answer, right? So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Just remember, William Blake is a popular writer who represented Romantic era. He is known to be a first-generation Romantic poet. His poetry can be divided into two parts, songs of innocence and songs of experience. Songs of innocence refers to certain poems that he wrote with the perspective of a child, which is very much innocent. On the other hand, songs of experience refers to a set of poems written by him having the mindset of an adult, where he highlights about corruption, suffering, and other harsh realities of the world. That's it. You don't have to go deep into the poems and stuff, right? Just remember, these are the two categories that you have to pay your attention. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right, I hope that you guys have completed. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. So today we discussed about two categories of poems related to William Blake when it comes to his writing, right? Songs of experience and songs of innocence, right? Okay, so we will move on to the next part. But this is another important fact that you have to pay your attention. Now we have a poem. Now, when you take songs of innocence and songs of experience, right? Basically, we have a poem in our syllabus. What is that poem? To the evening star. So, to which category that you can put to the evening star? This is something important, right? Can we put into the category of songs of innocence, or else can we put that into the category of songs of experience, right? This is something important. Make sure to write down. William Blake's poems to the evening star is not explicitly part of songs of innocence or songs of experience, but was published in Poetical Sketches, 1783, one of Blake's earliest collections of poetry. This collection predates Songs of Innocence 1789 and Songs of Experience 1794, but the poem aligns more closely with the themes of innocence due to its tone and subject matter. So our poem To the Evening Star, it was actually written during the time period of 1783. During 1789 only he started Songs of Experience. During 1794 only he started Songs of Experience. So our poem To the Evening Star is written long back to these two categories, right? So it is actually not belong to any category of these two, right? So it is known to be one of the earliest poems of William Blake because Songs of Innocence he wrote in 1789, Songs of Experience he wrote in 1794, he wrote To the Evening Star in 1783. Prior to this year and prior to this year as well, you can understand, right? So this is actually one of the earliest poems, and during that time he has not categorized his poems into any categories. So we cannot put To the Evening Star to Songs of Innocence or Songs of Experience. But based on the thematic relevance, of the poem, we can say that certain themes align with Songs of Experience. Because in this particular poem, we are not going to discuss about destruction, vengeance, aggression, hubris, or else any other human weaknesses, right? Any other human characteristics. So here we discuss about the beauty and the fertility and the blessing of the evening star. So one can say, if we are going to put this particular poem into a category, we can say that this belongs to the category of songs of innocence, not the songs of experience. But make sure to remember our poem, the poem prescribed for us to the evening star, it does not belong to any of these categories because it was written long before Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Songs of Innocence were written in 1789, Songs of Experience were written in 1794, but To the Evening Star is written in 1783, right? Before this categorization only, our poem To the Evening Star is written. That is why we cannot put To the Evening Star to none of these categories. But if you go through the characteristics we can find in this poem, right? This particular poem can be taken to the category of Songs of Innocence because in this poem, William Blake does not discuss about any negative phenomenon referred to human experience. Hurry up and write down. Right, how many of you are still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, I hope that you guys have completed. Please send me a message if you have finished. Shall we move on to the next part? Hurry up. Send me a message. Right, I hope that you guys have completed. Okay. Now let's discuss about the poem. Now we are moving to the poem. There are certain key areas which I have highlighted in red. So you have to highlight them as well. William Blake's poem To the Evening Star is a short but deeply symbolic piece that reflects his blending of nature, spirituality, and divine imagery. So basically, he is discussing about certain key things in this poem To the Evening Star. Blending of nature. It is obvious because we all know that most of the romantic poets they highlighted the beauty of nature. This is not something new to us, right? We know that definitely he will highlight the beauty of nature. Spirituality, right? So the spiritual happiness that one may get in his or her life, and divine imagery. So evening star is known to be goddess Venus. So that divine imagery is actually highlighted in the poem as well. This is written in 1783. It appears in his early collection Poetical Sketches. In this poem, Blake personifies the evening star or goddess Venus as a guardian angel who brings peace and protection as the day transitions into night. So in this poem, he discusses about a star, which is known to be the evening star. From this poem, he highlights about goddess Venus. Goddess Venus is known to be the goddess of love, fertility, and beauty according to the Roman mythology. So when you go through Roman mythology, you will find that for each and every element there is a god. For fire, there is a god. For hatred, there is a god. For water, there is a god. For air, there is a god. So that is how Roman and Greek mythology was made. So goddess Venus is known to be the goddess of beauty. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි සිංහල විවාහයේදී කියනවා යම්කිසි ගෑනු ළමෙක් ගොඩාක් ලස්සනයි නම් අපි කියනවා වීනස් දෙව්දුව වගේ. ඔයාලා අම්මලාගෙන් අහලා බලන්න ඔයාලා අම්මලා කියයි කියන්නේ. වීනස් දෙව්දුව වගේ. ඒ ළමයා හරියට නිකන් වීනස් දෙව්දුව වගේ. So Venus Devduva means, right, even in Sinhala we use that term. Venus Devduva refers to, right, that much of beauty can be seen because goddess Venus is known to be the goddess of beauty, fertility and love. So in this poem, William Blake actually addresses goddess Venus. So evening star and goddess Venus both are same, right? So William Blake thinks that evening star is the goddess Venus who provides love and fertility to this world. So he is requesting from the evening star to provide that protection and the blessing to the innocent people who live in this world, not only for people but also for animals, right? When we read the poem, we will understand that. But before moving to the poem, make sure to understand the summary of the poem. The poem actually known to be an addressing poem, where the poet is addressing the evening star or else the goddess Venus. Hurry up and write down. Right, is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Is there anyone who is still writing? Okay, I hope that you guys have completed. Make sure to complete your notes also then and there. Yes, you are eligible for the recording, but make sure to remember when you are participating to an online class, then and there finish that work. If you are watching the recording again and again, you are wasting your time, right? Don't do that, right? You should be capable enough to work with the teacher and complete your work then and there, right? That is some kind of a capability that you have to maintain, right? Okay, so we will move on to the next part, right? So let's get some kind of an idea about goddess Venus. I have given a picture as well. We can refer to the picture later. So first and foremost, we will pay our attention to goddess Venus. Who is goddess Venus? Because in this poem, we discuss about goddess Venus. So I hope that you guys can see the screen, right? Venus is the Roman goddess associated with love, beauty, desire, fertility, and prosperity. She is one of the most prominent deities in Roman mythology and serves as the counterpart to the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Venus is celebrated not only as a figure of romantic and physical love, but also as a symbol of abundance, growth, and harmony, right? So she is known to be one of the most famous goddesses when it comes to Roman and Greek mythology, right? So most of the Victorian writers actually got the influence to write their poems from Greek and Rome mythology, right? So classical literature, Greek and Rome mythology can be identified as classical literature. So English literature is actually influenced by classical literature, right? So these characters we can find in classical literature, right? So most of the English writers, they were very much influenced, not only William Blake, even John Keats, most of them are very much influenced through classical literature, right? So when you are going to learn about To the Evening Star by William Blake, you should definitely know who is goddess Venus, because the evening star refers to goddess Venus, right? So the poet is referring to goddess Venus. Hurry up and write down. right? I hope that you guys have completed, right? So I will show you the picture as well. So these details are very important to us, right? When we discuss about the poem, I will show you the details. Make sure to remember the details, especially the torch that she is taking and her hair color, right? That is very important to us. And as you can see here, I don't know whether you can see this. It's not that much clear, I guess. She is dispersing some kind of a silver dew, right? Some kind of a silver dew is actually dispersed by her here and there. And you can see the dove here, which represents us the peace and serenity, right? Because she is known to be the goddess of love and fertility, right? Okay, now you know who is goddess Venus, and now we will move on to the poem and we will discuss the lines line by line. We will discuss the meaning of the poem, and the specialty of this poem is as the second poem in your syllabus. In this poem, we have so many poetic techniques. Now, as the first lesson in our class, we learned so many poetic techniques, and now we can practically check whether you are aware of these poetic techniques or language techniques, literary techniques, right? So in this poem, we can find a lot of poetic techniques. So I have highlighted them in red color. Make sure to pay your attention and write them down properly, right? So let's start. So this is how the poet is going to start the poem. Thou fair-haired angel of the evening, right? So thou fair-haired angel of the evening. This is how the poem starts, right? So you can write that down. That is there in your textbook, right? That is the first line. Thou fair-haired angel of the evening. The poet addresses the evening star as the fair-haired angel, right? So fair-haired refers to that golden color hair. I saw you, right? In the picture, I saw you, right? The fair-haired angel, right? From that particular picture, you can get an idea. Yes, she is an angel. There is no doubt about that. So always compare this picture with the description. That is why I have given this picture. Then you can imagine, your visual imagery will work. Your visual imagery will work. Look into the description and always try to compare the description with the picture, right? Okay. Thou fair-haired angel of the evening, right? So the poet addresses the evening star as the fair-haired angel. Addressing poems are known as odes. This is the first technique that we find. So there are certain poems in literature, my dear students. The poet or the poetess is addressing something. It can be a river, it can be his best friend, it can be his girlfriend. So if you are addressing someone, if you are addressing certain thing, if you are speaking to something, right, it is known to be an ode. Ode to a nightingale, to the evening star, ode to a Grecian urn. Likewise, there are so many poems written by John Keats, William Blake, where they are addressing to certain rivers, certain mountains, certain birds, and certain stars. So this poem is known to be an ode. What do you mean by an ode? Ode is known to be an addressing poem, right? The poet has used personification here. That is another technique that we come across. We all know what do you mean by personification. Personification refers to giving life to non-living things, and especially for animals, human attributes for animals, right? So here we all know that evening star is inanimate, right? So calling the evening star as an angel, you can understand the poet is giving life to a star. We all know that the star is inanimate, but the poet is giving life to the star. Thou means you in archaic language. This is another technique, right? Make sure to highlight them all. You can write them down while the teacher is giving the lecture, right? Thou refers to you in archaic language. What do you mean by archaic language? Archaic language refers to Old English, right? Old English refers to, right, whatever the English that they used, right, before now, which means for a long period of time, English evolved as a language, right? So when we take the time period of Shakespeare, right, this kind of language is used, but today we don't use such words, right? So thou is actually a very old English word, right? And today the word thou is replaced by the pronoun you, right? Thou means you in archaic language. So archaic language refers to certain English words that we used in what do you call ancient time, or else in what do you call, they are known to be words of Old English, right? We use these words like long time ago, but now they are not in usage because there are now new words are replaced, right? The best example is thou. There we can replace that word with you in modern English. Archaic language refers to Old English. So thou means you. So by using the word you, we can understand personification. At the same time, different type of language is used here, which is known to be archaic language. Archaic language refers to Old English. The poet says that the evening star is the fair-haired angel of the evening time. So the poet says, during the evening time, you will be the fair-haired angel. The goddess Venus is directly compared to an angel of the evening, so it is a metaphor, right? So this is a direct comparison. I have told you the difference between a simile and a metaphor. A simile can be taken as an indirect comparison. A metaphor can be taken as a direct comparison. So he never tells that you are like the fair-haired angel. No, 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 no. He never tells that. He directly tells that you are the fair-haired angel of the evening. So there we can find a direct comparison. So that is what we call a metaphor. So in the first line itself, we can find so many poetic techniques. Number one, the poem can be taken as an addressing poem, so it is known to be an ode. Then the poet is actually addressing something inanimate, giving life to it, giving human attributes to it, which can be taken as personification. Then we can find archaic language or Old English there. Thou means you in archaic language. And finally, the evening star or else the goddess Venus is actually compared to a fair-haired angel, right? Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. right? Okay. So you can understand from the first line itself, there are so many poetic techniques that you have to follow. So in the first line, the poet says, "You are a fair-haired angel," right? You are a very beautiful angel with beautiful bright color when it comes to your hair, right? Fair-haired angel. So you can compare. It's true, right? When you take the picture, you can accept it, right? She is fair and her hair is very beautiful, right? Fair-haired angel, bright color, right? So she is known to be an angel, right? You can very clearly see that, right? So this is the picture of the goddess Venus, right? Okay, then we are moving to the next slide. Now, while the sun rests on the mountains, right? Now the sun is resting on the mountains. Like, look at the picture. You can create the mental visual images, right? So, sun is actually setting down. So, the poet has not said the sun is setting down. Instead of that, the poet has said the sun is taking a rest. Now, normally the sun cannot take a rest. Human beings can take a rest. Now, if you are tired, you can take a rest. If you are sick, you can take a rest. But the setting of the sun here is actually poetical, right? Poetically described by the poet as setting down. That is a very powerful expression of language, right? Instead of telling that sun is setting down, right? The poet has said, okay, the sun is not setting down, the sun is taking a rest, right? From dawn to dusk, right? Sun has worked really hard, right? So it provided that light or brightness to us, to the earth for a long period of time. Now it is time for the sun to take a rest. So the sun is taking a rest. That is what the poet has highlighted. But in reality, we know that sun cannot take a rest because sun is not an animate object. It is an inanimate object. So here we can see poetic language, right? So what kind of poetic language is used here? Right now, while the sun rests on the mountain's light, right? Sun is having a rest on the mountain's light, right? So you are appearing during this time period. So evening star is appearing during that twilight, right? Transition period, right? So the daytime is getting over and the night time is getting started. So during that transition period only, the evening star is appearing. That is the idea given me. Right? Okay, let's pay our attention to the explanation. Now, while the sun rests on the mountain's light, the word now reminds the reader about the significant function of time when the emergence of the evening star can be seen. The poet has taken the sun as an animate object. The sun can't rest as it is inanimate. The setting of the sun is depicted as taking a rest. This is the technique called personification. This is a technique called personification. So sun is actually personified. Instead of saying the sun is setting down, the poet has said it in a very light manner, which is known to be another literary technique called euphemism. When you are telling something in an indirect manner in literature, that is known to be euphemism. I gave you that technique, please make sure to check that. So if your grandfather died, right, you can say, my grandfather kicked the bucket. My grandfather is now in heaven, right? So my grandfather attained to nirvana. There are several ways of telling the same thing in different manner. That is what we call euphemism. So instead of telling sun is setting down, the poet has said, okay, sun is taking a rest. That is also a technique which is known to be euphemism. You have not directly told something, you have said something in an indirect manner, right? That is another technique called euphemism, right? So hurry up and write down. Right. So today we discussed about the first part and the second part. In the first part, we discussed about the beauty of the evening star, where it highlighted the beauty of the evening star, telling that comparing the evening star to a fair-haired angel. And in the second line, it says at what time the evening star appears. Right. This is called the twilight transition period. Right, when the sun is setting down and the moon is rising at that time period, right? So that is the transition period. So evening star appears during the transition period, right? That is the highlighted idea we have to remember. Okay. How many of you are writing this one? Please pass me a message. Did you finish? Dilki, you did not write the previous one. Okay, this is the previous one. Previous slide means this is there in your writing book actually. In your textbook, you don't have to pay attention to this. The same idea is here. Right, it is there in your textbook. Okay. Right. How many of you are still writing? Please pass me a message. Hurry up. Right, okay. So this is what we are going to discuss today. This is one of the most difficult poems that you have to pay your attention. So the rest of the parts we will discuss on Saturday. So make sure to join the class. Even if you can't join the class, make sure to go through the recording. You can understand what the teacher has said several times. If you have any problems, you can send me a message to my number and you can clarify whatever the clarifications that you need. So we will wind up the session. We will meet Saturday to discuss the rest of the poem. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Good night.